Fails, the bill is moved to engrossment, and Senator will hold it there for today.
Got it.
Senator Hall, you're recognized on Senate Bill 990 to suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. In 2008, a pilot program for countywide polling programs was established to permit counties to conduct elections at countywide voting locations instead of by precinct. Early on, participation was limited to counties that exclusively use electronic voting systems that maintain computerized and linked registration lists at polling places. The program has expanded each year since its inception to include 90 counties. To participate in the program, a county must first hold a public hearing. Senate Bill 990 repeals Section 4307 of the Electoral Code that establishes a countywide polling program. In response to feedback from members, there will be a couple of amendments to bracket this provision of the bill so that they apply only to the state's 10 largest counties and to clarify that the bill applies only to election day. With that, Mr. President,
Senator Alvarado, what purpose?
To ask the author some questions.
Do you yield?
Yes, I do.
So your bill is getting rid of countywide polling. Is this on election day, early voting, both?
Election day only. Will there be amendment to confirm? So election day, it is only election day, but we're adding a statement that clarifies it's absolutely election day only.
Okay, so why not have it for the entire time, election day? Is there something that you think might be going on during some kind of irregularities during the early vote period, but not on election day?
If I had my way completely, it would be both periods. I think it should be, but not everyone shares my view on both time frames.
Okay, so during the committee testimony, we heard it was said about some theoretical possibilities that a voter could vote more in more than one location. Has that actually happened?
Problem is, the way we manage the elections, we have no way of really knowing because of the lack of monitoring on the poll books and the delays that occurs with them, and there's very little check and balance on it. So we have actually very, very sketchy way of doing that. So we really don't know, and that's one of the main problems is the lack of knowing.
Well, again, here we are with yet another election bill. I've lost track how many we've passed now, 20, 30 something. I don't know, because every day there's at least a handful. And I don't know how y'all keep coming up with more ideas on this topic, but again, there's no basis, there's no proof, there's no evidence that someone has voted in more than one location. You're going on some theoretical approach here. Why not base it on factual, on evidence, something that you can point to and say, in this county, somebody abused it and voted in more than one location?
Because of the way they handle it, collecting information, collecting data, and actually finding things like that is extremely difficult. And it's not just people voting in more than one location. That's not the issue, is that you have precinct votes that are spread all over the county, and to aggregate those votes, you never really know if something got lost in the translation of getting from the vote spread all over the county down to central county to one location. It makes it extremely difficult to ever audit that because of the way the votes are broken up.
Do you know how many counties currently have the countywide polling?
About 90.
Yeah, 91. Are you concerned that now that's going to cause an extra burden on some counties? finding more polling locations? I mean, there's more cost involved.
Don't see that as a particular problem. What it does is it trades security of the elections for convenience, and I think security of elections is far more important than just convenience.
Okay, but has security been breached in any way? Do you have any evidence that this has taken place?
Security can be breached by mistakes, not by intention. This is not particularly due with anybody concerning about fraud. It's the fact that we have the precinct votes spread all over the place in multiple places, and it varies from from year to year, and not knowing how those votes ever get aggregated, because it makes it almost impossible to make sure that the number of the votes that get to the county when they're aggregated are actually what happened as it spread all over the county. By the votes being cast in a precinct, it will be much easier to verify and confirm that the votes that cast in the precinct ended up in the totals in the county.
Do you have any evidence of these mistakes?
The problem is we don't have any way. It would be like a bank taking the money and never having an audit of it, just letting the money come in one window and go out another window, no audit of it. This will give us the ability to make sure that the votes are being transferred and it is accurate. It's something we don't know. It's unknowable.
So why not change your bill to an audit instead of doing away with countywide polling, if that's your concern?
Because that just auditing it the way it is would be much more complicated, much more expensive, and very time consuming. This simplifies the process.
Well, is there another type of auditing that would satisfy your concern of some theoretical situation that could occur?
I cannot come up with one that would be practical with the countywide voting.
You know, countywide voting has been a convenience for some. It's not just that it favors one side of the aisle or the other. Have you heard any feedback from people who maybe are concerned that this is going to cause them to drive across town as they're going to work or dropping off their kids, and there's a convenient polling location near them?
It's not a matter of whether it favors one or the other. That's not the issue at all. It's just the overall accuracy. I think it's very important that we are as sure as we possibly can be that a vote cast is counted just the way it was intended to be.
You're talking about accuracy, but do you have any evidence, any information to prove that there hasn't been accuracy in countywide polling? You're proposing this bill that isn't based on any factual information, zero evidence.
We have a number of instances in which we have been able to identify the precinct counts, the county count, and the state count at the state level, and found significant discrepancies where we were able to get the data. The data is so carefully guarded and kept from the public, it's almost impossible to get the information to confirm it. But where we have looked for it, we have found that the difference in the vote count at a precinct and the county and the state vary sometimes significantly.
Was that reported to the proper authorities, whether it's the Secretary of State?
There have been numerous reports to the Secretary of State about discrepancies like that.
And what took place with those discrepancies?
I have no idea, because no action has really been taken.
So then maybe that's an issue to take up with the Secretary of State and not necessarily do away with countywide voting that affects 91 counties.
Well, if they were to take action on it, it's my feeling that this is probably what they would say should be done to make sure that they are able to better account for the votes.
So why not have a conversation then with the Secretary of State's office?
We did.
And what was the response?
They like this idea. They think
what was their response to looking at the discrepancies that you say y'all found with some inaccuracies with tallies or something?
They agree that this is a good solution to that problem.
But did they actually look into the discrepancies? You said that they did take them to the Secretary of State's office.
I can't speak for what they did. When we brought the issue up with them, I know what their response was. They liked what we were proposing.
But if you're really concerned about these irregularities that you claim happened, they went to the Secretary of State's office, nothing was done, aren't you concerned that somewhere along the way somebody dropped the ball in reporting those discrepancies?
What has happened was this was put up as a pilot program, and they had no authority to change it. It was in statute, but when we talked to them about it, they agreed that this would be a more secure way to handle the votes.
Secure because there were some violations of secure measures, or?
I don't know what they said, but they agreed that they thought this was a good solution.
So did the Secretary of State's office sign off on countywide polling? I don't recall that they tried to intervene with 91 counties opting to do this.
No, they didn't. They didn't intervene. When we took the idea to them, they looked at it and they said, "This looks like this would be a good solution, along with other changes."
Did they intervene when these 91 counties chose to have countywide voting? Did the Secretary of State weigh in and say, "Oh wait, this could be a violation. There theoretically could be people who vote in multiple locations on one day"?
I can't speak for them on what they actually did.
Okay, it's to me this seems like it is an overreach, an attempt. I would love to know about those irregularities, those audits that you talked about that maybe could find some truth to what happened, some tallying between the precincts and the county, to maybe understand what your concern is here.
Okay, I'd love to sit down.
What you're saying is theoretical, what could happen, and there's no evidence of it.
Okay, I would love to show you.
You're presenting a very weak case on why you're proposing to do away with countywide voting. But I thank you for answering my questions.
Senator Bettencourt, what purpose?
Ask questions of the author.
Do you yield, Senator?
Yes.
Senator Hall, I know that you know we've got an amendment coming to make sure that the bill itself, that nothing in the act will be construed to assume that we'll have precinct voting on early voting, correct?
That is correct.
Right, so this will be that we'll have a precinct voting only on the day vote itself.
That is correct.
Right, because really what this is about is there's also convenience to the voters issue here, because, you know, in their, like it was and, you know, currently is in Lubbock County or other counties, you've got precinct voting, so people generally start out where they live and end up back where they live. That's why the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so we're giving them the convenience of having that full day back at their home precinct.
That is correct.
Right, and so none of this will make sure that this amendment makes it clear that there's no precinct voting that can apply, Senator Alvarado, to any early voting votes. This is an amendment that we'll take here shortly. And I think it's a good combination of recognizing the obvious that you want to provide early voting to the widest possible range. But, you know, there is a good argument for a precinct vote solution. And especially in, in Texas, where we still have conventions coming up for presidential elections and having people there after those polls close. So that's also convenience for the people of both political parties to go to their home poll and know where they're going for a precinct convention. True?
That is true. It's right in their neighborhood. So
right. Then that's it.
Neighborhood.
And because so we'll say this is a neighborhood-friendly,
absolutely,
amendment coming up here. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator Bettencourt.
Senator Gutierrez, what purpose?
For a few questions, Mr. President.
Do you yield? Senator Hall, do you yield?
Yes, I do.
Senator Hall, what I want to know from you is which counties in particular did you see these instances of fraud or mistakes that happened? Which counties?
We're not talking about fraud. We're talking about accuracy.
Which counties?
Several counties, and I'd be glad to.
Which one, Senator Hall?
There have been a number of counties, but the whole question that we do not know because there's no accountability. The system has no way of being audited.
Which county, Senator Hall? We're here to solve problems, real problems. I want to know what the instances of, please let me finish my question, sir. I want to know where this burning problem comes, because this clearly, I see a hand, someone's holding a piece of paper in the air. I want to know which county specifically you saw where there was inaccuracies between precinct counties and between the precinct counts and the county counts. Which ones?
Two of them come to mind, or one is Harris County and one is Smith County.
You know, it's funny because we did an audit for Harris County, did we not?
Yes.
And the then Secretary of State, John Scott, found that there was no fraud in Harris County, found that there were no issues there with regard to what you're talking about polling sites at countywide polling. He found none of that. And everybody, they can hold all the white cards that they want up. The fact is, there were no issues with countywide polling sites open on election day.
You only find what you look for.
Only find what you look for. Okay, so tell me about the data being so carefully guarded. What county did that happen in, Senator Hall?
All of the counties that have countywide voting, there is no way to audit from the precinct to the county to the state because of the way the votes are spread out. We have numerous reports, and I can get you videos of poll books being changed that contribute to the confusion.
Videos of poll votes being changed. Who took those videos?
Okay, if you'd like to come by office, I've got three-ring notebooks full of affidavits from individuals have seen problems like what we're trying to solve with this particular activity.
And yet the Secretary of State has investigated all of those issues and found none of these things to be true.
You find what you look for.
He's the Republican-appointed Secretary of State, sir. He's a lawyer that's certified.
I was not part of the audit, so I can't speak to it at all.
And you're saying that these things, that somehow votes could get lost or switched, I think is what you're trying to dispel right now, that the counts could be different from the precincts and the counties. Is that correct? Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
We don't know, and this is a way to be able to audit.
Okay, so you don't know if that's, and when you say that votes were switched, then that's actually fraud, right? That's what you're saying.
I didn't say the votes were switched.
You just said that a second ago. You said that you could show me videos where people are switching their votes. Did you not say that?
No, I did not say that. I said there are videos of poll books being changed. That is the voters in the books, the poll books. That has nothing to do with, that is not the vote being changed.
Poll books being changed.
Correct.
Okay. And what was happening when those poll books were being changed? By whom?
We don't know because they can be remotely addressed.
Did somebody call the authorities?
Issue, that's only one side issue. The main issue is because with the votes spread out throughout the county for each of the precincts, it's virtually impossible to audit to make sure that the votes as they were cast throughout the county for the various precincts get accumulated, aggregated at the county level accurately.
And when these poll books were being changed, were they being changed by mistake, or were they being changed because of some fraudulent reason?
There is no way of knowing that.
Okay, so it could be fraud or it could be mistake, correct?
There's no way to tell. Those books can be remotely changed by anybody who has access to them.
Were poll books lost?
But that's not the issue.
Were poll books lost?
Yeah. Huh?
Ask him to stay on.
Yeah. Okay.
Were poll books lost?
The poll books are not the issue. The issue is the fact that the votes are counted, spread for all the precincts throughout the entire county, and then they have to be aggregated when they get to the county level, and it is virtually impossible to do an audit to make sure they got aggregated.
And you're saying
properly.
These things happened by mistake? Yes or no?
Very well could be by mistake.
Could happen by mistake. All right. You have no evidence to prove anything that you're saying. There's not one article in any publication in the state of Texas that proves what you're saying. There's not a law enforcement officer that can prove up what you're saying, correct? Correct?
I'm saying we don't know. There's nothing to be proven.
The Secretary of State has done these audits, and he's saying these things didn't occur on many publications. Houston Chronicle, Texas Tribune, I can open them up for you.
I don't know that what they audited addresses the issue we're talking about here.
All we know is that according to you, these things could happen by mistake. Things can get lost. You're the chair of Senate Administration, correct?
That is correct.
Is that how you lost the blue card that I gave you last night to your office? Just got lost.
Senator,
That's the truth.
your attitude, your comments are out of line. Yes, they are. You stick on the bill. You don't talk about a chair and their work in a committee. You are no longer recognized. You put your mic up. Senator Eckhart, you're recognized.
To ask questions.
For what purpose?
Of the author, please.
Yes.
So, Senator Hall, I'm quoting directly from the Secretary of State's report entitled Report to the 88th Legislature under Section 43.007I, Texas Elections Code, relating to the countywide polling place program. Page 2, successful countywide precinct program. And I quote, to date, apologies, Siri got involved there for a moment. Quote, to date, 87 Texas counties have applied for and met the Secretary of State's requirement for the successful countywide precinct polling place designation. And the report goes on to say there are no security or fraud concerns surrounding voter center voting. But you refute that. Based on what?
I don't know what they did, how they did the audit, how they arrived at that conclusion. I don't know what they looked for. I know you will only find what you look for.
And you have said that before, you only find what you look for. So are you aware that precinct by precinct voter data exists in exactly the same form whether or not that vote was cast at a voting center or at the neighborhood polling location?
Say that again. I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about.
Precinct by precinct voter data is maintained by the county clerk in the same format whether or not the vote was cast at a neighborhood polling location or at a county-wide vote center. So the data does exist and it was audited.
But it has to be aggregated when it's spread all over the county to come back together again. And I don't know that was ever audited.
So your bill would prefer us to have the most disaggregated system.
No. The most
How do you
aggregated.
figure?
By voting in your precinct, all of the votes cast in a precinct for any particular candidate would be clearly identifiable.
And then all of those votes would, of course, have to be transported to a central location
That's
for
correct.
aggregation.
Again, that's correct.
So how is it safer to have more and smaller polling locations scattered throughout the county to come back to a central location?
Less aggregation.
Say that again?
Less aggregation from the fewer precincts because all the precinct data will be collected in one location.
So how is it that you arrived at the bracket that's going to come up in the, or perhaps I should just wait until that amendment comes. So I'll wait on that. So there are now 91 counties. You are aware, of course, that the countywide election system was piloted over a number of years by the Secretary of State, correct?
Yes.
So the Secretary of State started very small with just 2 counties, correct?
I was not a part of it, but I imagine they probably did.
Are you aware what the first two counties were that chose county-wide voting locations?
No, I'm not.
Would you hazard a guess whether it would be a big county or a small county?
Probably one of those two.
The first two counties that wanted to pilot county-wide voting locations were Erath and Lubbock.
Okay.
So we'll get to it on this amendment, but I think it's curious that I will be curious to find why you draw the line on your bracket that you do. What percentage of people voted at county-wide polling locations in the November 2022 election cycle?
I'm sorry, say it again.
What percentage of the electorate chose to go to a county-wide polling location rather than their precincts in the 2022 November election?
I really don't know, and with what I'm trying to do, it's really irrelevant.
Well, it won't be irrelevant to those people who can no longer take advantage of that convenience.
It will be convenient as getting to their homes because it will be in their neighborhood, but it'll be the precinct they live in. And it can't get much more convenient than voting in your own neighborhood.
Let's talk about that convenience then. So 70% of the electorate went to a county-wide polling location in the November 2022 election. 70%. So 70% of the electorate found a county-wide voting location more convenient than their neighborhood precinct.
Okay. This bill, this change is about security, not putting convenience ahead of security, not sacrificing security for convenience.
Well, you keep mentioning security, and yet you can produce no corroborated evidence of any security issue. And you also have stated multiple times that it's convenient to go to your neighborhood, and yet 70% chose not to. But let me ask you another thing about your neighborhood polling location. So neighborhood polling locations, where are they usually? Aren't they usually in a public school?
They're located in lots of different places.
They are often located in schools, though, aren't they?
Pardon?
They're often located in schools, aren't they?
It varies all over the state.
So you are aware, of course, that schools are choosing not to offer up their spaces for neighborhood polling locations because of the security concerns now. Are you aware of that?
I've heard discussions on that.
So county clerks are finding it difficult to find neighborhood polling locations. Are you aware of that?
I've had no one come to me and talk about having difficulty in finding locations.
You might want to talk to some county clerks, because I think they'll tell you. It's also a struggle for county clerks to locate ADA, Americans with Disabilities accessible polling locations. Are you aware of that?
I know it's a requirement and we've been able to meet it.
It's much easier.
And this bill will not change that.
It's far easier to meet Americans with disability accessibility requirements in a county-wide location than it is in neighborhood polling locations. Also, the precincts change. The precinct lines change, correct?
Every 10 years. They're reevaluated. Some don't change. Not all precinct lines change.
Well, actually, commissioners also redistrict for their JP and constable districts, correct?
Yes.
So those lines do change, and the polling locations themselves, even without precinct lines changing, can change from election cycle to election cycle, correct?
Precinct lines?
No, polling locations within the precinct.
That's up to the local folks in charge of the elections to put them where they want to put them.
So I'll give you an example. In my own neighborhood, if it is a election that takes place in May, it's at the school. Because but if it's an election that takes place in November, it's at the church. So the polling location changes.
This has nothing to do with that. That's their choice. That's local control. Now, if you want us to add something to the bill along that line to control where they're going to put the locations, I would not be in favor of doing that.
What I'm trying to highlight here is that I have yet to hear any corroborated security issues with countywide polling locations. And I have heard easily refutable suggestions of convenience about neighborhood polling locations that the numbers simply don't support, since 70% of the electorate did not choose their neighborhood polling location and instead chose the convenience of a countywide polling place. But thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Whitmire, what purpose?
Would the gentleman yield?
Do you yield?
Yes.
Say, Senator Hall, did you say it only applies to the 2 largest counties? Did I hear that?
No, sir. The bill as written applies to all counties.
When you say as written, I mean, what do you?
Yes.
What about the way
I've been told there might be an amendment. The bill as written applies to all counties.
Well, what got my attention was, and it kind of disturbs me, if we start continuing to have one set of practices for the urban areas and another set of practices for the rural, it was leading me to ask you, does this bill even apply to your district?
Yes, it does. The bill as written, because I agree with you. I have a real hard time myself with these bills that apply to either just the small counties or just the large counties or just the middle-sized counties or somebody's home county. I think they should apply to all counties, and that's the way I wrote the bill. We did have someone that indicated they wanted to try to put an amendment on that would limit it.
It concerns me as I sit here and have watched in recent sessions, we continue to have 2 Texas, whether we're talking about schools or voting practices, law enforcement, I just think it's wrong. So we kind of should look at this like we're all in this together. So the good news is it does apply to your district.
Yes, it does. And I agree with you. I don't like having 2 Texas myself. I think what we do
that
should
leads me to the lack of the merits. And in all due respect, I just really think you're misinformed about the practices in an urban setting like Houston. As Senator Eckhart said, 70% of the people chose not to vote in their neighborhood. In Harris County, they're voting at the courthouse downtown. So that shows the convenience. And I understand your concern about we can't look to convenience and compromise security. There's probably not a better secure site than at the courthouse. And I'm going to speak briefly against it on final passage. I want the members to recognize, from my vantage point, you're making a bad vote. And I know you don't intend for this to be partisan, but in Harris County, the people that use countywide voting more than anyone are the Republican voters. They're coming from Katy, Texas, working in the med center, and they can't get back in time to vote. Kingwood, Clear Lake, Baytown, it's a huge geographic area that they need to be able to vote safely with proper audits wherever they find themselves on election day. And to restrict it to just election day, I think that's even worse than early voting, because on election day, if you get tied up because of our weather or of our traffic, you don't have another day. So it's not like people live perhaps as organized as your neighborhood. In an urban setting, when you have to deal with traffic, our weather, you need the flexibility to vote wherever you find yourself on election day. And I just think it's a huge mistake, and I'm not sure that it's going to solve anything. In terms of the audit, what is it? I'm having a hard time following you. Where your votes got to do with the audit or the accountability of a verifiable election? So let's take a site downtown at the courthouse. You vote there. Or if you vote at the Katy County Annex, what has that got to do with counting the votes properly?
It's not one location. It's that the votes are cast in multiple locations for precincts that are spread all over the county.
Well, that's what you'd have under a
That's what it
neighborhood.
is, and so there's no way to easily aggregate those and confirm that the votes that arrive in the county and central counting actually are the sum of the votes that were spread all over the county, because there is no audit that's done at that level. By voting in the precinct, it will be very easy to do a one-for-one comparison between what the precinct votes were and what the county got.
Do you have any idea how many precincts we have in Harris County? Hundreds, if not thousands. And so I just don't think you understand the size and scope of our process, and it's got some flaws, there's no question. But I'm just not so sure if you make me go back to my precinct, you're going to be able to have a better accounting than someone that votes at a county annex on North Shepherd or in Humble or somewhere. So I guess we just have a different understanding of the process, and I'm just not sure who planted this idea in your head, but I respect your right, but I'm of the opinion it's going to be very unpopular with people that are used to voting in safe, reliable, easy access, parking, etc. And now you're going to tell them, if you work in a med center and you live in Clear Lake, and you'd plan to take off at 3 or 4 to go vote, but you find it's 5 or 6, you're not going to make it home on election day. And I don't think it's voter suppression on your part as much as voter interference. And so I want to make a closing statement in a minute, just be on real solid ground with the people that live in my county, that I'm in favor of countywide voting. So, in all due respect, let's move on, I suppose.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bardwell, Blanco.
17 ayes, 12 nays. The rules suspended. Chair lays out in second reading. Senate Bill 990. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 990 relating to elimination of the countywide polling place program.
There is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment. I believe everyone has it.
Floor amendment number 1 by Betancourt.
Senator Betancourt.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. And members, this amendment just clarifies that nothing in the act will be construed to impact polling locations used for early voting by personal appearance or to prevent a voter from casting a ballot in any branch polling place in the territory served by the early voting clerk. And I think it's acceptable to the author.
Yes, it is, Senator. It's the way the bill is actually written, but this is like belts and suspenders to confirm that it's actually for Election Day only. And thank you for the amendment.
All right, thank you.
Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. You recognize passage to engrossment.
So moved, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bardwell, Blanco.
17 ayes, 12 nays. You passed to engrossment. Senator Whitmire, did you want to say something?
Just briefly, Mr. President.
Do you want to do it on third reading? This is just...
That'd be
okay, we'll do that.
I'm sorry.
We'll hold here, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.